Hi everyone, this is Abel. Welcome back to my channel. Today, as always, we have a really interesting list of science fiction and fantasy books. We're going to discuss them. We have reading updates, reviews, and publication updates. Actually, we'll tell you more about those later. This is going to be great. Let's get ready. But before we start, remember that if you're interested in science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. So if you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribing, leave a like, share this video. Also, remember that tomorrow, my epic fantasy novel, The Crimson Fire, will be released out in the wilds. There will be a live stream celebration here on my channel. Tomorrow around, I think if you're in the US, around your lunch break, and try to find a reasonable time frame that works for you and for me, because you know I am in completely different time zone. If you want to say hi, come and say hi. If you have questions about the books, come and ask questions. Or if you want to shout me any kind of questions on my DMs or in the comments, and you cannot be part of the live stream, I will answer to your question, and then you can watch the replay wherever you want. Thank you so much. The first book I'm going to mention is actually a novel that I mentioned in one of my last videos for 2024, which was about my most anticipated books for 2025. And it is the Tome of Heren by Damien. And I couldn't show you the cover on that video because it was going to be reworked and republished. This novel actually went through a pretty complicated history, a publication journey, because it was published traditionally with a publishing houses, and then something really bad happened. It was unpublished, and the author finally got the rights for the novels again, and he is published them by himself in self-publishing. And this is actually the cover, the new one, and no shade to the old one, but this is chef kiss. This is so dark and so engaging, and it actually makes you want to know what's going on, why this character has those red shades, and what are those whips on his hands, or is he dancing? I don't think he's dancing, even if in many novels dancing is used as a synonym to say sword fighting. I'm intrigued. So this is a chunker, around 700 pages, I think, for the paperback. So it's a chunky boy, and it is about a guy that he has to become a keeper, which is kind of a sacred figure in this world building. There hasn't been a keeper for hundreds of years, says in the description, and the nation is vulnerable because of that. The protagonist, Ador, will become the next keeper, but in order to do that, he has to find the hero of old, the huntsman. So we have a quest there, which is a classic staple for epic fantasy, and I really love that. But in order to do that, he has to find a book. So we have a MacGuffin here, the Tome of Heren. That's the title of the novel. So he has to find the book in order to find the huntsman, in order to become the keeper in this world. And of course, the journey will be really dangerous. He will have discovered the world, he will discover himself, and probably uncover some kind of great lurking evil. And I love that, especially because the books look so big in scope and so ambitious, and also a little bit dark. I don't know if this is it said it is dark fantasy. I don't think, especially I think here in the description is military fantasy and epic fantasy. So this is right the kind of novel that I love. It is just about the right length, and can't wait to give it a try. And actually, I think I have a digital e-arc for this one, but I will probably buy the paperback because it looks so good, and I'll let you know as soon as I read it. If you have read this book, because I told you it was published traditionally a couple of years ago, I think, let me know what you think about it. If you're hyped and interested for the new release, let me know about it. We could read them together and discuss about the books. I'll let you know. Okay, we cannot go an entire episode of my show without mentioning a book with a beautiful cover by Jeff Brown. Yeah, we could call it the Jeff Brown Beautiful Covers Show. probably, and be completely on point for this, but the novel is Return to Aramon by Ezra Ferguson, which is kind of a big deal because the description says that he is an award-winning artist from machinima, and I am sure I have heard about those. The specific description should ring a bell, which actually ringed faintly a bell for me, but I don't know exactly what they're talking about here. But it sounds interesting, not only because the cover is so good, but because the description is on point. And it says we have 3 points of views: an aging hero, all but forgotten by his countrymen. Then we have a lone teller, bearing truth and darkness in equal measure, and then we have a rash young son of nobility, dreaming of an adventure from high atop his tower wall. I like those, especially the aging hero. We need more experienced old heroes, or kinda old, because they have rich backstories. I love the trope of the coming of age fantasy stories. When we grow up near the character, when we follow him through his journey, we discover the character and the world together at the same moment. But I also think there is an added value when the character has a rich and specific and mysterious and troubled and painful backstory, and we need more about those. So please give us more. The description is pretty long and it's really detailed, which is actually a thing that I really appreciate, because most often than not, we have really vague description on Amazon, which is an understandable thing, because authors, they don't want to give away the gist of the story, and they try to stay away from spoilers, and understand that. But most of the time, they tell us so little about the story, that it's kind of a turn off. So please, this is a big tangent to say there is a lot of things told in the story. There's actually 2 different descriptions. One, it is a more eagle eye of the story that says that it is a sweeping heroic fantasy written in the tradition of the classic epics, seeking that which is good, that which is true, and that which is beautiful. And also in the end, it says that he has it is been inspired by the masterworks that created the genre, and there is respect for the writing. And it's an installment of the age-old saga made for those who seek a deeper fantasy. You're calling me out? Yes, this is interesting. I'm gonna read it. The book looks amazing, but also the whole premise, because there is of course, an anciently evil lurking. There is these different kind of characters that have to join forces. There is a bubbling of ancient forces trying to destroy the political stability of the world. And that always worked for me. So yeah, I'm hyped about this book. Yeah, I'm going to read it pretty soon, and I'll let you know what I think about it. And if you have it on your wish list, let me know what you think about this one. And yeah, I'll let you know pretty soon, hopefully. Godfrey's Crusade by Mark Howard. Talk about coming of age stories. This is about a coming of age story. This is about a young knight that accepts to be part of a expedition / battle against neighboring countries that are uniting together against his country. And it says that he's a young and idealistic knight, and he doesn't hesitate to volunteer for this noble quest. But he finds that the biggest enemy is not all of those countries gathering around and trying to destroy his country, but the Crusaders themselves. Because he has visions about the near future and about the development or the ending of this war. So he's in a peculiar place. But I also like the fact that the author decided to give the story a specific spin, because I think there is a discussion here about the intrinsic value of volunteering to be part of a war, and of the reasoning around beginning a war, and actually waging war against another country, because it says that the actual enemy is in the Crusaders themselves. So he's one of them, of course. So there's an interesting internal conflict there, framed inside. That is framed in the usual setting of epic fantasy that we all love and cherish and care for so much. So yeah, I'm hyped about it. The cover is really good. I might say this looks like it's been done by Jeff Brown too. Yeah, I know. So the novel has been released a couple of days ago, I think April 15, but I've been looking and seeing, and I'm familiar with this cover. I think it's been around for quite a while. So perhaps the production it wasn't long. It was longer than I thought, but I'm happy it's been published, and I want to give it a try. So yeah, let's give it a try. I'll let you know more about it as soon as I read it. Remnants of Dawn by Elliot Brooks. This is the sequel to Peace and Turmoil that I loved back in 2020, I think, 2019. Yeah, that's where I read it. It was a chunker. It was beautiful. It was the classic epic fantasy with shades of George R.R. Martin, but also classic epic fantasy that I loved. It was huge, it was beautiful, and then we got nothing for many years until now. But I'm happy, really happy that this book actually exists. As far as I remember, because I need a refresher since it's been a hot minute since I read that first book. It was about four nations enjoying a long stretch of peace after a long war, but then there were seeds of rebellions and political turmoil, of course, after that long period. And I loved the characters, especially the two female points of view. One was a scholar that was discovering ancient powers, and another one was a princess guarding the peace of her own kingdom. And it was epic, and it was painful, and there was also another character that was a son, okay, an illegitimate son that had a specific journey. This was really interesting and really intriguing and heart-wrenching. And yeah, this makes me want to reread book one, and it was released, actually the second one, on ebook in April 18. As far as I can tell, there's no paperback for this still. I hope there will be, because when we have those kind of chunker books that they're so long, and I try to read them on ebooks, it is really difficult for me to keep the attention and the momentum going. I don't know why, but reading paper, it makes it much more digestible for me. Even if on ebook should be easier, because there's word-wise with suggestion for words that I don't understand because of the language barrier, of course. But I'm really interested for this. This is almost 1,000 pages long, so it is even more ambitious than the first one, and I really want to read it. So congratulations to Elliot to pulling it off after all of this year. I'm pretty sure it will be worth it, because when the gestation of a novel is so long, it could be because life happens, of course. We will love to be allowed to be writers and authors 24/7 and minding all about those and keeping all of our energies and concentration for writing books, but that's not how life works. So yeah, it's been a long journey, and I'm pretty sure it will be absolutely worth it. If you have already read this, let me know what you think about it, and I'll let you know what I think about it after I reread book one, because I need a refresher, and I'll tell you what I think about this when I read it. I'll let you know pretty soon, hopefully. Yes. There's also an upcoming release that I'm really curious about, because this is from another Italian author writing in English. His name is Michele Amitrani, and we're talking about a series of short stories and novella called Of Shadow and Light, which is actually a dark fantasy retelling of Red Riding Hood. Yes, sign me up. I am part of this. I am on board with the hype train. So let's talk about just the description of the first volume. We have actually 3 releasing pretty close back to back together, we have Hunter of Shadows, Not Their Fairy Tale and Darker Than Night. And it says that we have a hunter that could become the prey, actually, because he's been tasked to, with this really difficult task, to actually go on hunt for this mysterious creature that is wreaking havoc around the land. And this creature, this monster, he is mysterious, he is able to hide really effectively, and at the same time to strike pretty deadly. And there's something mysterious going on. The truth is different from what it looks. And just try to understand what actually happening while hunting the monster. So yeah, this looks really, really interesting. I also need more short stories and novellas in my life because I usually need more time and more page count to actually become invested, to establish any kind of connection with characters and the world and the settings and the whole vibes of the story. But I have been proved wrong time and time again with really interesting novellas and short stories. So yeah, this is a good chance to broaden my taste. So let's see how it goes. I think the first one is already out. Yeah, the first one is already out. The second one is out tomorrow, and the third one is out on May 25. So I'll give it a try and let you know what I think about it as soon as I read it. Let's talk about the new Paladin Order by Charles Cromwell and Kenneth Cromwell. This is a complete trilogy, I think. I think the books are all out and available right now. The first one is the Tome of Thierogard. I hope I pronounced it correctly. The Siege of the Tyrone Keep and Descent to the Sunken Cathedral. This says that it's a mix of all the things that we love and really interesting brands and stories that are really, really well beloved. It says it's a fun action-filled fantasy inspired by The Lord of the Rings, Conan, and Dragonlance. Just basically the perfect storm. We have two protagonists in the description of the books. I don't know if they're a double point of view, but one is Trium, I think, that is, he wants to become a legendary paladin, and the evil guy, which is Dementius. So they're clashing because one wants to become a hero and the other one wants to rule the world. But it's interesting that the bad guy, in order to become the overlord of the known universe, has to give a payment for his knowledge, and he has to deliver a weapon to a dark god, an artifact that is called like the Golem. And that's really interesting. I like the covers. They have this old style vibes, especially the first one with this character on the hand of a huge statue. What does it mean? It's so interesting for me, so intriguing. And the end of the description of the first book says, this is a time of growing chaos, a great civilization fall into decay, and ruthless powers fight to fill the void, a time when a cruel can rise to power from the word of a single spell, and the honorable fall from the chop of a bloody axe. This is an age in desperate need of heroes. Yes, that's the kind of story I really want to read, and given the fact that this has been published quite a while ago, if you have read this, let me know what you think about it. I'll let you know what I think about it as soon as I read it. We did a little bit of sci-fi in this video, actually a really intriguing space opera that it is Cosmic Strife Assoult by Steve Gavin. This has a really compelling description that gives you a lot of backstory. You know, as I told you that I don't like description that are too vague. This one gives you exactly what you need because it's kind of a really, really short story in and of itself. It starts with the description of a lost hero, someone who was an hero 15 years ago, and it tells you the story about how this man was fighting along a planet that was trying to fight against a conqueror force. They're called Luion, which are those I don't know if they're actually aliens or if a separate kind of race of humans. But anyway, they were trying to conquer this planet, and this man was in the army. He was a hero because he tried to fight against that invasion. I don't think he succeeded, but many years after, his 3 children are now prominent figures for humanities. One, he is a senator, another is a lieutenant, and another he is a rebellious pilot. If I am not understanding badly the description, and they have this legacy of this hero, which is their parent, and they have to fight against the same conquering force of those Luyans. So if I am understanding correctly the description, this is a really interesting internal and familiar struggle, because it puts the stakes of the overall conflict on a very personal level, because they have to deal with the very difficult legacy of these heroic figures in their past life. And that's incredibly interesting, especially on a character development point of view. And I'm really curious to see how it works in the context of a classic space opera with huge spaceships and exploration and battles, and the classic big scope that we love in space opera. Color me intrigued. If you have read this, let me know. I'll let you know about what I think about it as soon as I finish it. Reviews. I had the pleasure to read Dance With Me by Livia J. Elliot. And I had actually read this a couple of months ago when Livia contacted me to ask me if I wanted to read the book and if I want to share the actual Kickstarter campaign for the special edition of this book. We will find the details in the description box. You can check out the Kickstarter. I don't think it already started. I think you can wish list it, show interest. I don't know the term. I should be more prepared about this. Anyway, and I also wrote a blurb for this book. I don't think that Livia already shared the blurb, so I don't think I am at liberty to talk about it, but follow her pages and see what she's saying about the books. And so I'll let you know what I think about the book without mentioning my blurb, because I don't want to ruin the surprise if she wants to use it in a special way, let's say. But this was a really deep and difficult experience for me as a read. Difficult on a personal level, not because the novel is difficult. So this is a story that has many layers, and you peel them all off while you read the book. It's a fantasy story about a doll, actually, a dancing doll. You know, the ones that they're inside a glass box with like a carry-on. Something like that you move the key and try to make them dance. But it is set in a fantasy setting, so she moves in a much more complicated way and in a much more beautiful and elegant way. And this doll suddenly awakes and has a conscience, and she gains life, and she has to struggle to understand the world that is around her, which is actually the room when she is along other dolls and others, the trinket things and things that makes this room look more beautiful. It is really detailed and interesting and painful the way the doll becomes aware of her abilities. So you see that the novel has an interesting stretch when she actually has to learn to speak, and the more time passes, this is actually a short story, or a novella, I think, so it's not long of a story, but it actually conveys effectively the character development of this little statue / doll. And the more she grows up, the more her vocabulary becomes compelling, and her ability to understand and to communicate with the others. She has this really difficult, really painful relationship with her owner, which is an elf, if I'm not wrong, that comes to visit her when he wants to see her dancing. She's a ballerina, actually. Yeah, that's important, and I'm telling you this hugely influential part of the story just right now. So she watches her dancing, but you quickly become aware of the fact that the relationship is not working, that he mistreats her pretty severely and badly. And you kind of, I think you have elements here to understand what's the meaning of the story. Okay, so it is about complicated, let's say complicated and painful relationship, and familiar bonds and romantic bonds too. So it is actually because the author herself states it pretty effectively on the Kickstarter campaign, on the description of the books. This is a really personal story, and the book was a way for her to deal with traumatic events from the past and to try to look at them with the security and the safe net that narration give us, to try and understand and analyze past relationships and post trauma in a really safe way. So it is a reflection about interpersonal relationship and the way we sometimes have a really hard time understanding what's wrong with the relationship that we are in, that we built, and that we should sometimes try to escape, or that we should try to fix. And there is also a reflection of how those relationships actually make our development of as person much harder or simpler, because this ballerina, the more you read, you'll see she meets other toys, let's say, and they all have their point of views and their life experience with the owner, with the elf guy, with the world in general, and they actually help her to have a more grounded view of what she's going through. And it's really nicely done, really elegantly written. It's always really painful, but also there are moments of levity, and it's actually really hopeful for the future. This is the kind of story that asks a lot of questions and refrains from giving you specific answers, and is not trying to lecture anyone, and I really appreciate that. But it is really hard hitting. It can be a really painful experience if you have been going through some kind of difficult relationship on a familiar level, with your parents, with your spouse, with your brothers and sisters, or with your beloved one on a romantic way. So I think you have to be in the right state of mind to properly enjoy it, because it can be pretty taxing on an emotional level, but it is also really elegantly done. So I think it's quite a nice reflection on the nature of love and relationship that can be really good or really harmful. So yeah, give it a try. And if you want, you can be part of the Kickstarter campaign. I've seen a lot of really nice picture on the Insta profile from Livia J. Elliot. It looks like a kind of an object of beauty in and of itself. And there's a lot of goodies, of artworks. Yeah, it's a really nice thing to look at, and really nice books to show off on your bookshelves. So give it a try. Let me know what you think about it. And I told you what I think about it. It's a worthy novel, and it's not a long commitment, so you can give it a try and can finish it in a couple of sittings. But as I told you, you have to be on the right mindset to properly enjoy it. Yeah, give it a try. Let me know what you think about it. I just finished also Chosen of the Dark Realm by David Cornford. This was a surprise. Didn't expect this to be so deep, so well researched, and also so dark. It is pretty gruesome of a novel, and I didn't expect this because of the bright neon flashy colors of the cover. Which is a nice artwork, but I think that steers your attention and on the wrong path. This is epic fantasy with dark tones, okay? The author doesn't hold any punches. So it is a pretty engaging story with a nice pacing, absolutely well written and engaging with really interesting characters. So the gist of the main setting is that there's been an ancient work many years ago, and the enemies and the Dark Realm where they were sealed away. Okay, so those sigils sealing those Dark Realms and entities away slowly begin to break, and you see in the story how this happens, and entities from those Dark Realm begin to seep in, to bleed in inside the realm that we have in the actual contemporary kind of medieval, kind of Middle Eastern setting of the story. And you see how they work and how malevolent and how cunning they are. And I think that's one of the most interesting things, the way those entities actually manipulate characters inside of the story. Because a few of them, they actually realize that they've been manipulated, and others, we see them from the outside, from the point of view of others, seeing them acting strangely. And it is really creepy. It is kind of scary, but also really interesting. And we see this woman that has to guide that she's kind of a guardian. She's the first one to understand that something really wrong is going on pretty quickly at the beginning of the story. And she has this strange relationship with the king. Strange because her abilities and her status get pretty quickly questioned, and what she has to do to save the kingdom and her influence are not, they're kind of frowned upon from a small subsection of the influential people in the kingdom. But she knows something is going on. She pretty quickly says, let me know what is going on there. I have to know. To the king, whatever you know, if you have news about what's happening there, I need to know. And that's interesting to see how she develops as characters and how she sees this malevolent wave of action growing. And it's kind of one of those characters that knows that something is going on, really bad is going on, and no one gives her the proper attention. And it's really annoying in the right way, because she asks herself, why aren't they listening to her? And then you have other characters like a young guy that sees something really bad happening and gets involved against his will. And then we have a treasure hunter that he's after a job, especially at the beginning of the novel, where he really needs this job because he's in a pretty dire situation. And then he gets the job, and then he goes on his mission, and something really horrible happens pretty soon. So yeah, the characters are really good, the dialogues are really good. This is one of those novels that doesn't hold your hand. You have to put the pieces together and understand what is actually going on organically by reading and going with the flow. And I like how the author refrain to explain us and to expose everything in a pretty plain way, in an effective way, because I usually like my good chunk of exposition in my novels when there are heavy dialogue explaining the world in an effective way, because the more books you read, the more easier it is for you as a strong reader to understand when the author needs to come to give you information, and he's doing it in a not so elegant way. But I don't think we got that here. We actually had dialogues that were needed, written in a compelling way to further character development and plot points. And we had a really small amount of exposition. So even if it is not exactly on my alley, because I write flowery writing and purpley writing and a lot of description and a lot of internal dialogue, so we didn't have that much of those here, but it works. Okay, this is around 500 pages, and I never had the feeling that I was missing something, okay, and that I needed more on the exposition side, or that the dialogues were clunky. They work, they generally work. The pacing is good, the action is really visceral, really strong as action. And if you like dark fantasies, that will be right on your alley. It was right on the cusp for me to be too much. because of the reader that I am. Okay, I'm really picky on the way that fighting and violence they get used in novels. This is a personal thing. It is really easy for me to think that the authors are overdoing it, that they're going overboard, and that they are using action and fighting and action scenes for shock value. Yeah, I don't like that. So many novels, I have DNF'd many novels because I thought they were unnecessarily bloody. Okay, that's why I don't read generally grim-dark. Okay, because then they're generally there for shock value. I don't think that kind of approach is really justified and it serves the story in any kind of meaningful way. But we don't have that here. But it is dark and it is difficult, okay, on that point of view. So depending on the kind of reader that you are, this could be a huge plus, okay, or kind of a little bit of a downturn, okay. So mind that. But in and of itself, this works as a story, as a first volume. But it is pretty evident for me that there must be more. Okay, that the story is continuing. That these characters. That the characters that we have here will have more to do, more to explain, more to live and to enjoy, and that the overall menace and evil lurking and seeping out inside the world will have much more development in the rest of the story, which has a pretty big scope. So yeah, it was really interesting, pretty unexpected. If you have read it, let me know what you think about it, but you should absolutely check it out. I have read the second volume, In the Words of Shadow and Light by Johnny Wirtz, which was a nice experience. The book is Ships of Merior. I had a pretty lengthy discussion about this book, spoiler-filled, on the Nerd Level Rising channel, heralded by Jake, which is an awesome booktuber. You should absolutely check him out, his channel. He has a lot of discussions about science fiction and fantasy in general, but he also has a series specific to this one, to the Words of Shadow and Light, on dealing with the story structure and characters and the fundamentals of the story, and then of course reviews about various books. So this one was a nice experience, but also a complicated one. So I have to tell you this: I usually am the really rare occurrences of type of reader that usually enjoys the first book of a series much more than everything else. Okay, so usually readers will enjoy the second one more. Because all the heavy lifting has been done in the first books, and we have all of the fun in the second. That doesn't happen to me. That never happens to me. Usually the first one is the one that I love more. Let's say it happens pretty rarely that the second one is my favorite one. For example, everybody says that Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio is the weakest book in the Sun Eater series. I am not okay with that statement because I enjoy Empire of Silence more than all the other books, even if the story became popular with Holy and Dark and the third book and so on, because they became faster on pacing and more bombastic and more complex as the series went, and I understand that. But the atmospheres and the dialogues and the writing of the first book, I was mesmerized, and I couldn't put it down, even if it is slow. It's a slow burner, and it is a kind of a complicated novel in and of itself. So the story changed, and it became what it is. The goals of the author became much more clear by reading the second and the third book, and I appreciate that. It is pretty honest. It's well done. I still think that the first book was a huge misstep, but I will continue with the series, of course, for the future. This is all to say that I had a similar experience with Ships of Merior, which is a great novel, actually half a novel. This is another interesting thing. But I like the Curse of the Mistwright more because of the overall structure, because of the characters, and because of the relationship between the two main characters that we had there. Those two brothers battling because they've been cursed by the mist, and that's what happened in the Curse of the Mistwright in the first book. Here we have a weird structure of the book because I have read the UK edition. So the original novel was so long that you have the US edition, which is on hardcover, which is an incredibly long book, and then you have the UK edition, which is Ships of Merior and War Host of Vastmark, I think is the second one, which is they decided to split the book because it was too long, and it stops the book kind of in a natural pause in this story, so it can work as a second book here if you don't know that the story was supposed to be much larger. So if you read the US edition and the hardcover, even on itself, you have a different experience from the one that I had, because I can tell this is not a finished story. Okay, there is a huge event at the end of this volume that can kind of serve as the end, as a natural pause, and in a way is an ending of the story, but I don't think that this one works actually as a second volume the way it is packaged in the UK edition. You have to read War Host of Vastmark to have a compelling story. And the first problem with this decision to split the book, that I understand, if it was too long, it was too long. If they had limits with the page count, they had limits. I'm not arguing with that. The problem is that the way it ends is not satisfactory, because trying to avoid spoilers, it is too similar to the way the first book ends. And given the fact that this is, of course, being half a book, it is shorter than the first book, you kind of have the feeling that we are retreading the same ground and asking why. And that's, of course, because this was not supposed to be the ending of the book. The real ending is in the second volume. Second part of this one, which is actually the third volume in the UK edition, but was the ending of the original American edition. And that's why the structure of this one is so weird, because we have a long stretch at the beginning, I think more than 30%, if I'm not wrong, with secondary characters. We don't see those two brothers in a much meaningful way until the story is well over the 40%, okay? I mean, they're there, but they're not on the forefront like others, like, for example, the Mad Prophet Dakar, which is not my favorite character. So I understand why, and I understand why he had so much space, and I can kind of see and predict, maybe I've been proved wrong with Jenny Wars. She always surprised me, but I can see the trajectory of his character and the character development that we can potentially have, maybe in the second part of the story / third volume. But here he's just annoying. Okay, he's a funny character. He gives the story a much needed levity after the very traumatic events of the end of the first book. So all the characters, they're dealing with what happens. Many years have passed, so they're still trying to cope with what happened and to find a different ground for their lives. But Dakar here, he's so over the top. He's always annoyed, always screaming, always battling. He always hating everybody, which is understandable given the fact of the nature. Given the nature of what he's going through, it is understandable, but he's not a nice person by any means, and I don't enjoy spending time with bad people, even in novels. But what he does, it is fundamental for the development of the story. He needs to be there to do certain things, so I understand why he's there, but also we didn't have had much of a development for him, because he seems to be going through the same motion, doing always the same thing, the same kind of mistakes. And I guess this is the point for him to going through those motions and through that kind of development to have a slow build towards something else. Or this could be a description about the cyclical nature of dysfunctional people and the way they try to, the way we usually make the same mistake over and over again. And sometimes we have the chance to learn from those mistakes, but we don't take that chance and we seem to be unable to change. So it's an interesting discussion in and of itself. But it can be a really great thing. So if you like the card, this will be incredible for you because you will spend so much time with him and enjoy his dialogue and his interaction with the others. For me, it was rough, okay? It was rough. I didn't enjoy my time with him. Also because I'm not sure how old he is, but he is a pretty mature person. And given the fact of what he does and his abilities, I think he's really, really old. Much more than he looks. And for that kind of person to have that kind of a long life and still being always the same annoying one, I was closer to say stupid. He's not stupid, he's really smart, but he's really flawed and he seems to be unable to learn from his own mistakes. And the novel doesn't give us much about his backstory, so we see him being this, but we don't actually understand why he's so that way. Why is that flawed of the characters? So I guess, given the fact that the story is so long, we have 11 volumes, we'll know more, we'll have much more of a background work being done and being laid out for him to have a proper explanation of his situation and see his character development. So I see why, and I kind of see where the story is going. But what we had here was so annoying. Okay? But that was less of the, I think around 30% of the story. The rest is actually what I expected from this book. So a much bigger exploration for Lysair and for Erathon, which are those two brothers forced to be in this multi-generation long conflict. They both are in pretty specific situation. They both have to struggle with what they want to be and what they are kind of forced to be. And the novel keeps giving us this deep reflection about nature, about responsibilities, about empathy, and about duty. It is really well done and really elegant. And we see those two characters constantly being forced to face the nature of their life and the nature of their call. There's an important reflection about the nature of art and the music, and a few things that I kind of predicted reading the first book became actual part of the story here, but in a way that I didn't anticipate it. And there's also a nice a few tidbits about the origins of this Strife and what happened on another world. It is incredibly fascinating, and I cannot talk about it here because it will be spoilers. But if you want to know what I'm talking about, go and watch that live discussion with a bunch of incredible people. That was an incredible experience. I have to say that this is making my reading experience really, really much more deep. And January actually was in that panel, in that live stream. And there's also a character that I didn't expect to be so attached, which is one of these 7 wizards. It's Lou Hain, that did something incredible in this novel. And it was kind of there, but also not that much there in the first book. And I didn't expect him to be so incredibly fascinating in this one. And I also missed another one that was so incredibly fascinating for me in the first book that was nowhere to be seen here. No, not nowhere, just on passing seeing here, which is Strife. And I want more about their characters. This is all to say that I was incredibly fascinated from this novel, which is deep, which is much more action-packed from, if you compare it with the first one, much more elaborated, much more deep, and much more bombastic. And if you compare this with the ending of the first book, which was incredibly action-packed, it is something. There is something to be said about the amount of detail and the drive and plot development and and richness of the action scenes in this one, which are really, really, really strong. And the ending, I'm saying ending because it's the first part of the novel, but what we have, the confrontation that we have at the end of this volume is incredible. It's heart-wrenching. It's on the level of the ending of first book, okay? And it's really painful because it's not an epic ending. So there is someone winning, of course, but it looks like one of those empty winning, okay? Someone become victorious at the end of this battle, but satisfaction? No, there's no satisfaction there. So, what a banger of a book, okay? What a banger of a half a book. It was a really compelling and deep experience. On a writing side, there's a lot to learn here. The settings, the dialogues, the actual prose. Sometimes it is really difficult. Sometimes really easy informations, really easy section are conveyed in such a rich language that you ask yourself, do we really need it to be that elegant and that richly compelled? So I think that a few sentences, sometimes you have the feeling that you want to get to the point in a much faster way. But it's coherent, the novel was planned to be this, and to have this kind of language, to have this kind of richness of a vocabulary. So January set to go in this way, and she's owning it, and she's doing it exactly the way she wanted to do it, and that needs to be respected because it makes the novel so much different and so unique. There's nothing like this that I've read. I've read hundreds of epic fantasy books, and nothing comes close to the kind of refinement and elegance of this one. So even if it is hard, you push on and you trudge on and you go on, but because it is so rewarding at the end. So if you haven't read anything by Jenny Wirtz, there are many other novels that you can start with, and others are much more approachable. But this one, it's her magnus opus. It is incredible, and you should absolutely give it a try. And yes, we are at the end of the video. Remember that tomorrow there is a live stream for the release of the Crimson Fire, my epic fantasy novel, the first in a series. There are things I cannot disclose, news about the books, that maybe I can tell you more about tomorrow, maybe not. I was supposed to have a copy here, but the shipment is delayed. Maybe it will be released after I finish to record this. If the book will be shipped at my abode in a reasonable amount of time, I will add a little bit of a video at the end of this one. If not, I will show you the book in the live stream tomorrow, okay? So, if you can, come and say hi. If you have questions about the book, come and ask me questions about the book. If you want, you can still pre-order it, because pre-orders are life and blood for an independently published author. If you have read the book and you were part of the ARC reading team, please upload your review. Let me know what you think about it. It doesn't have to be elaborate. The more you tell, the more the happier I'll be. But if you want to be short and sweet, this is perfectly fine for me too. And yeah, thank you for being here until the end of the video. Remember that if you enjoy science fiction and fantasy books, this is the perfect place for you. If you want to see more videos like this, please consider subscribe, leave a like, share this video. If you want to see more videos like this right here and right now, you have more videos right here, right now. Thank you again. Keep being awesome. I'll see you in the next one.